Hi, everybody. It's Miss Susan, and I wanted to talk to you today about drawing the way we do it in our Waldorf early childhood classrooms. So, drawing is such a wonderful activity to do pretty much any time. It can be calming, it can be help a child to focus. So I'm going to actually do this series before I start talking about what I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to tell you that I'm going to do a three-part series on drawing in Waldorf for early childhood. So this one is just kind of the basics, how we work with it, what kind of materials we use, how to um, interact with your child when they're drawing. And then the third part, I'm going to talk about this tool that we use for assessing children to see if they're ready to go into first grade. There's some different tools that we use to decide, but one of them is the house person tree drawing. So in the third part, I'll talk a little bit about that. But for today, I wanted to just get started and give you some things to think about because I don't know, we Waldorf early childhood teachers think about pretty much everything. So I'm going to turn my camera down so you can see my workspace, which is a little messy right now because I'm working on some paintings. But so first I wanted to talk about what to draw with. So we always use crayons in our early childhood classrooms. We don't have the children drawing with markers or pencils or anything like that. At least I never did. I couldn't promise that nobody did. This nifty little roll was one that one of my daughters used in the early grades to keep their crayons. When I work with my early childhood children, we always use a little baskets to keep the crayons in. So, what kinds of crayons do we use? You know, when I was growing up, I just used the plain old Crayola crayons. But in the Waldorf school, we use these nice stock mark crayons. There's other brands too, but this is just a nice crayon where the binder is beeswax, or at least mostly beeswax. It doesn't really smell like beeswax, but it's a more natural kind of material, and it's not as waxy as like the Crayolas or those kind of regular crayons. And these crayons come in two different forms. And there's other brands of crayons that come in different shapes too. I've seen like bean shaped ones or whatever. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the great block. This is the block crayon versus stick crayon debate. So we combine, we have these two wonderful shapes of crayons, and and the question is, which one is better for the young child? Now, just so you know, I think that the stick ones are better, but I've tended to use both kinds, mostly stick crayons and some of these in my classroom. Now, the reason that I think the stick ones are better is because you can get this kind of pincer grip that's so important when children start to write, and you can't really do that with the block crayon. Now, the thought is that the block crayons. Let me demonstrate for you. Oops, there's my notes. Oh no, what did I do? That the block crayons are made more for use in the grade school because you can use them in so many different ways. Each different side can be used, and the corners and the edges can all be used to make different kinds of marks. So I'm using like the corner to make a more defined mark, and I'm using the side to make more of a background. You can use the edges to get a different kind of mark. And really, the preschool child isn't really there yet, so they can draw with it, and that's fine. And they're really cool. And also sometimes during our drawing time, if I had kids who so I had if they had black crayons, they would just take them and stack them. And it's not drawing, of course, but it's kind of fun to play with the colors. Um, so anyway, you can try them both out, but I just wanted to clue you in on the big debate. So then, once you have your crayons, and I'm going to set these aside for now, you need to have some paper to draw on. So you can either just draw on, I mean, nicer. This is just like regular printer paper. Um, Nicer paper is always better, but in my classrooms, we often went through so much paper that we would just use this paper, so we would have enough. And a lot of times you'll see in a Waldorf early childhood classroom, if you're using sheets of paper, that we trim off, we round the corners. And the idea behind that is that the world is so hard and it has so many edges, especially if you live in a city. So this just softens it a little bit. And you can try it. You can try it for yourself. Just trim a piece of paper or two. You can buy fancy little edge cutters. I always just use the scissors and just see how it feels. See if you feel, not with your hands, but feel inwardly the difference between working with these two different shapes. I like using the rounded corners, and I used to sometimes, while the children were playing, I would sit and cut corners, and they would come and gather the corners, and it usually meant there was a mess to clean up afterwards, but they had a lot of fun just playing with these corners. They became money or snow or food or all sorts of things. So the everything and anything can be played with. So you can use plain paper, and when I did it in my classroom, we always would have the children draw on both sides of the paper just to be more efficient. You can also buy, I don't have any to show you, but in the description I'll share a link so you can see them if you want. But Waldorf main lesson books, they're just blank books. I use those sometimes with the children, or you can just use like a regular old sketchbook. I like to use this size, 8.5 by 11. Some people will fold the paper in half and use a half sheet. You can use whatever size you like. I like this size just because it gives those little hands a little more room to move around, and I like to draw big, so I assume that the children do too. So we have that, and I also have, especially if you're using just sheets of paper, you might want to have a mat to put underneath. I shared this on my do-it-yourself parent-child class, how to make this, but it's very simple. It's just a paper shopping bag, a brown paper shopping bag that has some newspaper inside. So that way you can put the paper on, and if you're coloring off of the edges, you'll color on this instead of on your table. So that can be a really nice thing. So when I always, in my classroom and at home, I would let my children draw. I mean, not during mealtime, but during free play time, I would let them draw. Sometimes I would encourage them to draw, like during cleanup time. If kids are getting too wild, I would invite them to go sit at the table and color, and have my assistant teacher sit at the table with them and color, because they need not only this action, but they need the presence of the adult to ground them. So I would keep my paper and my mats, my coloring mats, available, and then I would usually keep the crayons up, so the children had to ask for them. That way I didn't have to constantly be thinking about where the crayons might be. They have a tendency to wander away if you don't really pay attention. So I would just put a few different crayons in the basket. And the younger the child, the less crayons I would put in there. And in the classroom, I tried to have one basket for each child, but sometimes we didn't have enough. And no matter what I did, the crayons would always get mixed together anyway. So I spent my other teacher and I always spent a lot of time sorting through. But you can just start with like even just 3 or 4 different colors at the beginning of the school year, or when you're first starting to do this, and then add more colors. I would tend to add colors seasonally. We would usually get some new colors, especially in the spring when everybody wanted to start drawing rainbows. And just a word about, word about black crayons. We don't usually use black crayons in early childhood. It's just such a strong color, and it tends to, I'm just going to use my green drawing for this, it just takes over everything. So I like to use like a brown instead for the dark color. It tends to be a little more, it just melds more with the rest of the colors. So of course you can decide for yourself, but that's in our classrooms we don't use the black crayons. So here you are, and I would really encourage you to draw with your child at least sometimes. So you have your paper, you have your crayons, and I don't give the children any direction for drawing other than that we draw on our paper, and that draw on when they're done with one side to draw on the other side. If the crayon does get on the table or under the table or on the floor, I've had all of those things happen to me. I haven't done them myself, at least not that I can remember. But olive oil on a cloth will get the crayons off of a smooth surface anyway. And I would always do that with the children and let them rub until it came off. So these are just natural consequences. If you draw on the furniture or the floor, you need to clean it up. And then I would just let them do whatever they want to draw, anything, and as I'll talk about in the next video, children tend to go through predictable stages with their drawings. Of course, every child's different, but I'll kind of go through those predictable phases with you because it's fun to observe them. And this is often the hardest part. I need a green. This is often the hardest part for us as adults. Don't comment. Resist the urge to say, what are you drawing? What happens when you mix the red and the yellow? Just let them have the experience for themselves. Don't just let them immerse themselves in the color experience and the drawing and the sensory experience of it. Sometimes, of course, I'm making a rainbow. Sometimes, of course, they'll come to you and they'll say, look, I just drew a rainbow. And you can say, I see. Or they'll ask you if you like, and you'll say, I see you used all the rainbow colors, or or you covered the whole page, or just some observation of the drawing itself. But really resist the urge just to pass judgment. What a good drawing, what a beautiful drawing, or whatever. That's really an ugly drawing. I don't know if you would say that. I wouldn't. But just to make observations of the actual of what's actually happening as opposed to the quality of it. And sometimes the children will tell you a story. I love it when a child comes to me with a drawing like this, kind of a scrabbly drawing, and they're like, look, I drew a picture of my mom. She's going to the store, and then she runs into her friend, and they, like there's this whole big story from what looks like just a bunch of scribble scrabble. So sometimes if you, not while they're telling it, but maybe afterwards, you can just write it down because those stories are so wonderful. Or sometimes if it's not a really long story, if it's just like, oh look, here's my picture of my visit with grandma, and then I would just write either on the back if they're not drawing on it, or on the front, probably with a pencil. I would just write grandma's visit, and then maybe write a date, 1/21, January 21, or 1, whatever today is, 26, 21. Now, when my girls were little, oh my gosh, I love to draw. They love to draw. I ended up with boxes and boxes of drawings, and I just ended up recycling most of them because, well, first of all, so many of them were the same, and I just didn't have the space to use them. So it's fine to not keep every drawing, even though every mark is precious and every moment is precious. But we can hold them in our hearts instead of in boxes, and keep a few precious, especially precious ones, or just ones that are typical of some age. I think like at the end of a year, it's good to go through them and sort them out like that, so you just don't become buried under papers. And let's see. Yeah, in my classroom, we would have one morning a week that we would do drawing together. So that was really nice, and the teachers would sit with the children, and we would all draw together. And like I don't really, although as a child gets older, maybe as they're moving more towards first grade, I might encourage them to hold a crayon like this, with a like that more, that way you could grip a pencil. Up until, just pretty much the whole time the child is drawing, I would do it. I would do it myself, and I would kind of consciously hold it like that, but I wouldn't say anything to them or instruct them. They'll learn from your example, and depending on their age, it's perfectly natural for them to hold it a different way. And then the last thing I wanted to say is spelling. I often would have children they would draw pictures that they would want to give pictures to their mommies or daddies, or brothers or sisters, or dogs or cats. And so they would ask to spell things, I love mommy, or I love you, or whatever. And while in our early childhood classrooms, we don't teach children to write. A lot of them just know how to write certain things, or they know their letters already. So I would just tell them the letters. If they wanted to write I love you, I would say the letters for them and let them write them down, unless of course I was too busy and I couldn't do it right then. But mostly just let them, the point of it is to just let them, to set it up so that it's fun and easy, and just let them do what they're doing, and take a moment to observe, how they draw, what they draw. Notice how their drawings develop from scribble scrabble to formed, and do it yourself too. It's good for us. It's good for us to draw and enjoy, and it's a way to connect with our children and demonstrate for them the importance. If we spend time on it, then it's important and it's worth doing. So do that for your children, and do it for yourself, and have fun. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.